December 1975. A young engineer walks into a conference room at Eastman Kodak carrying a machine the size of a toaster. It weighs almost 4 kilograms. It takes black and white photos, 0.01 megapixels, and records them to a cassette tape. It is the world's first digital camera, built inside Kodak, by Kodak. His bosses look at the future of photography sitting on the table in front of them, and their response, in the engineer's own words, was, "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." 37 years later, Kodak filed for bankruptcy, destroyed by the very technology it had invented first. This is not a story about a company that missed the future. It's about a company that saw the future perfectly and chose to fight it. To understand why Kodak fought its own invention, you need to understand what Kodak actually sold. Hint: it was never really cameras. In 1888, George Eastman launched a camera with a slogan that changed everything. "You press the button, we do the rest." Photography, until then a chemist's hobby, became something anyone could do. You mailed the whole camera back to Kodak. They developed the film and reloaded it. The genius was the business model underneath. The camera was cheap. The film, bought again and again and again, was where the money lived. Kodak had invented the razor and blades model before Gillette did. And it worked for a century. Kodak film captured the world's memories, weddings, wars, moon landings. The phrase Kodak moment entered the language. By 1976, Kodak sold roughly 90% of the film and 85% of the cameras in the United States. At its peak, Kodak employed over 140,000 people worldwide. Its hometown of Rochester, New York was a company town in the fullest sense. Kodak jobs, Kodak schools, Kodak philanthropy. Understand this: film wasn't a product line. Film margins were extraordinary, and that river of profit paid for everything else. Which is exactly why what happened in 1975 was so dangerous. When Steve Sasson demonstrated his toaster-sized prototype, Kodak's management faced the innovator's dilemma in its purest form. Every digital photo was a photo that didn't need film. Embracing digital meant strangling the most profitable business in the company, maybe in all of American industry. So they did something more subtle than ignoring it, and this is the part most retellings get wrong. Kodak didn't ignore digital. Kodak patented it, researched it. By the 1990s, Kodak held foundational digital imaging patents and had spent billions on R&D. In 1995, it launched consumer digital cameras. In the early 2000s, Kodak was briefly the #1 seller of digital cameras in America. So the failure wasn't blindness. What Kodak couldn't do was let digital cannibalize film on digital's terms. Every strategy had to protect the film river. Digital cameras designed to push prints, kiosks to print your files, hybrid systems like Advantix. A $500 million film digital hybrid nobody wanted. Meanwhile, companies with nothing to protect, Canon, Sony, and eventually the smartphone, raced ahead unencumbered. And here's the detail that makes it a tragedy. Kodak's own market research in the early 1980s reportedly concluded that digital would replace film, and estimated the transition would take roughly a decade or more. The analysis was right. Management treated that decade as time to defend film, rather than time to become the digital company. Compare Fujifilm, same industry, same collapse of film. Fuji took its chemistry expertise and pivoted: cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, medical imaging. Fuji is thriving today. The difference wasn't information. It was the willingness to stop being what you were. The film market didn't decline. It evaporated. Peaking around 2000, global film demand then fell off a cliff, faster than even the pessimists inside Kodak had modeled. Kodak's revenue and workforce followed. from over 60,000 employees in the early 2000s to about 19,000 by 2012. Round after round of layoffs hollowed out Rochester, a one-company town losing its one company, the same doom loop we saw in Detroit at city scale. The endgame had a bitter irony. As the operating business crumbled, Kodak's most valuable asset turned out to be Sassoon's legacy, the digital imaging patents. Kodak spent its final independent years suing Apple, Samsung, and others for infringing patents on technology it had invented and failed to commercialize, extracting settlements to stay alive. On January 19, 2012, Eastman Kodak filed for Chapter 11, listing $5.1 billion in assets against $6.8 billion in debts. The patent portfolio, once valued in the billions, sold for around $500 million. The company that owned photography missed the century's biggest photography boom. Today, humanity takes more photos every few minutes than were taken in Kodak's entire first decade. All of them filmless, none of them Kodak moments. So why did Kodak fall? Not because it missed digital, it invented digital. Not because it lacked information, its own research predicted the future with uncanny accuracy. Kodak fell because its most profitable business made the right strategy unthinkable. The film margins weren't just revenue. They were identity, culture, and the salaries of everyone in the room whenever digital strategy was discussed. Economists call it the innovator's dilemma, but there's a sharper way to say it. The question is never whether your cash cow will die. It's whether you will be the one to replace it or watch someone else do it. Fuji answered one way. Kodak answered the other. And if you think this is a story about the past, every car company selling engines while the market turns electric, every TV network protecting cable while streaming grows, is sitting in that 1975 conference room, looking at the toaster. That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it. Next file, a sea so large it had its own navy, erased from the map in 40 years on purpose. Subscribe for the Aral Sea.